Parents of Reddit, what is the worst thing your child has caught you doing? Not embarrassing, but once when I was in the shower, my 4-year-old yanked the curtain open and asked me why I had hair on my dong. When I tried to tell him that I don't have a dong because I'm female, he asked me if it was my butt. Try explaining that girls don't have front butts or a dong while standing naked in the shower with the door wide open. Finally, I just told him he'd have hair on his butt one day and he cried and ran away. I saw my dad in the shower once when I was like 3 or 4. I asked him how many of those, pointing at his testicles, he had, and he said, 5. You grow more as you get older. I believed that crap until I was like 11. I got worried once because I still only had 2. I used to ask my friends how many they had. She saw me peeing once. As a dad, no big deal. Explain it, move on. She tried it recently with predictable results. The mats needed a cleaning anyway. I'm gonna pee daddy style. I caught my dad cutting coke when I was 6. He told me it was anti-sweat powder for a friend that had very sweaty feet and let me help him bag it up into single foot usage. I only realized a few years ago what was actually happening. I found a trunk full of some of my parents' stuff from when they were dating and first married, including papers they wrote in college. My dad, who went to college about 4 years after my mom because he was in Vietnam, plagiarized about half the papers he turned in. He copied the papers my mom turned in word for word, or they corrected me. My mom actually plagiarized herself because she typed all his papers. Finally, something not about fricking, unless of course all the papers were about fricking. This is somewhat related, not that I was doing anything bad, but I definitely felt caught. My son has Crohn's disease, and when he was diagnosed at 6, he had a lot of trouble with an abscess, for which he needed minor surgery. So, after the surgery, he was left with a wick in place on his butt to help the abscess drain. Anyone who has ever been through this knows it's common for people to wear a pad or panty liner during the draining phase for convenience. So, my little then 7-year-old would go happily off to school with a secret backpack pocket full of panty liners in case he needed them. Predictably, being 7 and being male, he thought this was the only use for panty liners. Cut to a few months later, I am alone in the bathroom and starting to suspect it's about to be that time of the month. My son ended up walking right in just as I was affixing a panty liner in place. I cannot accurately describe the look of shock and confusion on his little face. He looked right at me and yelled, "Mom, I see you with my butt things. Take that off. Those are mine." He's come to be convinced I had secret butt surgery and didn't tell anyone. I just had a pilonidal cyst. Don't Google it. 2 months ago and had the same thing done. Nothing like having a 4-inch blood-soaked tail sticking out from the top of your butt. My 2 boys had just come home from elementary school adult education lecture and I was working in our garage. They climbed up in the rafters where they had their fort while I worked below and asked me if I would answer some additional questions for them about the things they had talked about at school. Believing myself to have conquered most all of my hang-ups, I said sure. My youngest boy asked me what CM tasted like. I asked him what his Tez blood tasted like. He said salty and I said that the same was true for CM. He thought about it for a while and then asked, "How do you know, Dad?" My wife and I were fooling around. I was going down on her while using her toy, one that turns and gyrates and vibrates, very loud, on her. Being responsible adults, I assumed I had locked the door to our room after putting the kids to sleep. Anyhow, she is lost in her pleasure, edging closer to orgasm, and I have my head buried between her thighs, with my naked butt in the air, going to town. So of course neither of us hear the door open, or our 7-year-old son wander in until he says mom, ugh, oh, We quickly attempt to cover up while he throws his hands over his face in an attempt to unsee the terrible things I was doing to his mother, except he leaves his fingers spread apart and puts his hands near his forehead, his body frozen in place in horror. I start laughing, mostly due to embarrassment and his ineffective attempt to hide. My wife takes him to his room and talks to him, asking if he has any questions. All he could come up with was, "Does this mean I am going to have another sister?" TLDR. 7-year-old son catches me going down on wife, expects siblings. I caught my dad jerking off to pee with the cat on his lap. Dad no. Dad, had a fap. with a cat, in his lap. My mom was visiting, and my 5-year-old daughter walked in on her while she was peeing. "You have hair on your tee," my kiddo said. "So does your mommy," my mom replied. "No she doesn't." And that's how my mom found out I get Brazilians. If it makes you feel better, when my oldest brother was 3 or 4, my dad's parents called and they asked him where mom was. He said in the shower, so they asked for dad and he said he's in the shower too. My brother snitched on my parents' couple shower to my grandparents. Saw my dad's Craigslist emails to couples looking for a physical partner. He's married. He used the phrase, "I have a long talented tongue that never gets tired." Needless to say, I'm glad I don't live at home anymore. My mom went out of town for the weekend and I went to the bar with my friends where we saw my dad on what looked like a date with another woman. After watching them drink a little and dance for a while, I couldn't take it, so I went home without him ever seeing me. After he got home, I asked him why he was home so late, to which he replied, "My boss was on my butt about a project I needed to finish up at the office tonight." He had no idea that I knew. I've tried so hard to forget about this, so thanks for having it flood my brain with the unwanted memory. Not parents, but I was freaking this girl on the floor of her apt, really going at it, and I see her eyes get big. I look behind me, and there's this 8-year-old boy staring at me. I can still picture his face like it was yesterday. I didn't know she had a kid. I didn't know the kid was in the apt. I don't know how long he was watching. I didn't know what to do or say. I still feel so bad about to this day. That look. My mother told me a story of when I was a child. They used to smoke herb and had a stash spot for papers and herb. Anytime their friends would come over, they would pull it out. It got to the point where I had seen it happen so much that I would run and grab it for them when their friends would get there. One day my whole came over for Thanksgiving. As soon as my granddad's butt hit the sofa and ran and plopped a big bag of weed on his lap in front of about 10 family members. Too bad I can't remember it though, or luckily. I'm a single mom, and when my son was 4 or so, he walked in on my changing and asked me why my chest was so much bigger than his. He said he didn't realize that it was actually my body that was big in my shirt. He thought it was just a type of shirt girls wear. Fast forward a few weeks. I guess he had been talking about this in his pre-K. The teacher emailed me about it and I said I would talk to him about it. He came home and I started talking about what was okay to say in school and what wasn't, and he says, "But mom, they didn't believe me when I said that boys have nipples and girls have boobs." Note to self: when I'll be having kids, lock the fricking door to my room. Knock 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 DAAAD. Knock 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 DAAAD. Holy frick, your mum is blowing me, can't you fricking wait? Well, me and my boyfriend were sitting down in the living room to watch a movie, and we have a DVD player that automatically plays whatever is in it when you turn it on. We turned it on and we get greeted with a big round butt being pounded like there was no tomorrow. Quickly turning it off and taking the DVD out, we laugh about my dad watching pee and decided to tell my mom when she got home. Mom gets home, "So mom, we found this in the DVD player." She started freaking out. "OMG, I am so sorry I left it in there 00. TL. DR. Found out my mom is a backdoor freak. That was not what I was expecting." I caught my dad watching pee on the TV once. I stood behind him, watched for a few seconds. I said, "Dad," he immediately changed to another channel, and he got a little bit nervous. I said, "What were you watching?" To what he responded really fast, "Nothing. Nothing." I always laugh when I remember that. Nothing. Nothing is one of my favorite pornos of all time. My bed faces the door. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Think the kids are passed out. Too stupid lazy trusting to close the door, so I instead reverse cowgirl it so I can watch the door. A few minutes in, I lock eyes with my son. I'll never forget his expression. The next day, he asked for me not to be naked in my bed anymore. "Okay, son. Sorry." During Christmas, I snuck into my parents' room to look for presents while they were gone. My brother and I looked under the bed and found a bottle of lube marked pleasure potion and something I couldn't identify, but my brother told me it was a chin corn cob. I being 9ish at the time, had no idea what that was, so I went and searched it up on the family computer. Much innocence was lost that Google search. I saw my first tea and found out my Mormon parents aren't as righteous as they say. Anyway, we left the chin corn cob and the lube on the bed, so my parents came home and immediately gave us a stern talking to about not snooping through their stuff. About an hour ago, I walked into the apartment and addressed my wife with, "There's my sweet piece of butt." 2 seconds later, our 6-year-old son walked out of his bedroom and said, "Hey, Dada." He's also found adult toys on several occasions. We were moving into a new house. I was 16, brother 13, sister 9. She couldn't carry much, so she took small things like lamps and some shoe boxes. She was carrying one labeled mom and fell and the contents spilled out. It was a shoebox filled with corn cobs of varying lengths, colors, sizes, races. One was a loud celeb that moved around violently, so there it was on the driveway, slam dancing around in a mosh pit of corn cobs. Never seen my mother so mortified. Slam dancing around in a mosh pit of corn cobs. Thank you, you made my day. Yes, top comment of my career is about corn cobs. I caught my mom doing M when I was 3 or 4. She's sober now. My dad took me to a crack house when I was 2. Solidarity, my brother sister. Well, when I was 12, my dad found an erotica I had written about me fricking a female version of myself from another universe. I earned some very weird looks after that. Oh crap, my dad actually has a Reddit account. Hope he doesn't find this. Well, not any of my parenting, but I did see my mom's boobs when she got out of the shower. It was just bad timing. Literally forgot to close her bedroom door and I'm turning to walk down the hall. Then bam. Boobs. My dad later asked me if I recognized them. Took me a while to get that baby joke. My, what a dad you have. Not a parent yet, but I once caught my parents fricking when I was 5. And the only reason I still remember it's because my mom was so worried she made me go to a kid's shrink weekly for 2 months. I found some flavored body oil in my parents' nightstand once. Strawberry. It didn't taste very good, so I was just confused. It only enhances the strawberry flavor of balls. Apparently my 3-year-old woke up the other night without my hubby and I knowing. We were in the middle of having passionate hot and steamy fricking session and she watched from the door without making a peep. Those of you with 3-year-olds know that right there is impressive. But it gets better. She watches us and then sneaks back into her room, closes the door and goes to sleep. Something she has never done. The next morning we are eating breakfast together and she says out of nowhere, "Mommy, why was daddy dancing on your butt last night?" I literally choked on my coffee and said, "What are you talking about?" And then she proceeded to tell me how last night she woke up and saw daddy dancing on my butt and then started to gyrate in the middle of the kitchen showing how he was dancing. My hubby could not lift his head out of embarrassment and left me to answer her question. The only thing I could think to say was we were having a dance competition and it was hot. And now she keeps asking to have a dance off. To the non-parents commenting asking why I lied to her and saying that I am confusing her. Please understand that explaining fricking to a 3-year-old is not only inappropriate, it would be dang near impossible. They just don't have the ability to comprehend something like that. Just this morning she and I went at it for an hour about why she can't wear a princess costume to school. There is no way in heck I would even attempt to explain fricking. She has more important things to learn at this age. Geez, I'm thirsty. Think I'll go ask mama for some juice. Goes into parents' room. Nah, this enough crap for today. I'ma go back to bed. I was walking past a house which is known in my area for holding people who deal and take high-class drugs such as M, crack, CNH. At the point of walking past an open window, I was shocked to hear a young woman's voice, likely 20-25 years old, shout, "I can't believe you're shooting up in front of the kids." To which a man replied in an aggressive voice, "They don't f***ing understand what it's doing. Those poor kids. Frick people like that." I'm a parent, but this particular story is about my nephew. My son is less than 2 years old, so I'm used to this age in my household. Kids under 2 can't really open doors. However, I had my nephew stay with me for a few nights who was 4, and he could open doors, and my sister forgot to mention he liked to barge into the bathroom. So here I am, changing my pad. When my nephew comes in, I still have the old one in my underwear, and seeing the blood, he asks, terrified, if I'm okay. Now, this isn't my kid, and I'm certainly not at the point where I've had to think of ways to explain this to my son. So I say yes, I'm fine and this is normal for grown-up women. He asks what it is and I tell him it's a period, which I then had to explain it's how my body lets me know I'm not having a baby. Luckily it went over well, but I had to explain it to my sister. She laughed and thanked me for taking over that conversation. Still embarrassing. My sophomore year of college, my folks let me throw this big cookout party for my college buddies. We were still underage, but the understanding was that we were in college and if we didn't go anywhere, have a freaking blast. So we're all getting hammered with my parents, eating awesome food, and having a wonderful old time. Everyone is good and drunk around 10-11 that night. All of my friends were stoners, but they were afraid smoking weed on my parents' porch would be disrespectful or something, so they kept it to themselves. My mom comes out and says she doesn't care, that she used to smoke in her day. I go to the front yard to make a phone call or something and have a cigarette. I come around the side of the house, and under my parents' porch I find all 10 or so of my buddies, and my mom, who as I'm taking the corner is putting the bowl up to her mouth. She absolutely freaking panics. She tries to toss it to the person on her right, like I don't even know, like I was going to get upset and ground her or something. She was completely flustered. I laugh my butt off and we tease her for being busted, and proceed to smoke under the porch. My mom hadn't smoked since the 70s. Pot isn't like it was back then. She went to bed pretty much immediately after. Her reaction to me catching her though was absolutely hysterical. The next morning we had to explain to her that pot doesn't have seeds anymore, that it cost like $40 for a small bag, and that yeah, you don't want to hang out and smoke a couple joints like back in the day. Totally expecting you to find your mom getting gangbanged. Boy was I disappointed. Peeing in the backyard. No big deal as a man, right? Until you walk by a back window a few days later and see your 3-year-old daughter squatting in the yard because that's how daddy does it. Mom was not impressed. If we're talking about pee, I caught my parents watching Game of Thrones. I watched Game of Thrones with my dad. It's not exactly what OP specified, but I thought it might be relevant. When I was 7 years old, I was sleeping over at my friend's place, and I walked in on his mum masturbating with a shower head in the bathroom. At the time, I thought she was just cleaning her tea, and felt embarrassed because I walked in on her naked. Now that I grew up, I can't imagine how embarrassed she must have felt. Now 14 years later, I still can't look her in the eye. If that was 14 years ago, you can help her with that. I think my son was about 6 when I had my lady friend over one night. Being fairly unwealthy, I had a 1-bedroom apartment and my son's bed was tucked away in the living room behind a couch, a mere 12 feet from my bedroom door. Cue loud moaning from the very enthusiastic lady friend. The next morning my son asked why she had made a weird noise. I said she was trying to stop me from tickling her. Poor excuse, but I think he bought it. Believable. Recently divorced. My girls were about 7 and 5. I was laying on the couch when my 5-year-old brings me my big girl corn cob she found under my bed. Mommy, what is this? I jump up and grab it from her and take off upstairs to hide it when my 7-year-old is hot on my heels. Mommy, what was it? Tell me. I walk out of the room and I hear my 7-year-old grilling my 5-year-old. Describe it, she said. My 5-year-old says, I don't know. Insert name. It was some game and it shook like this. Demonstrates her whole body shaking. Would have loved to have heard what they told their dad. I am sure that was mortifying for you, but it is really funny for the rest of us. When I was younger, before the internet gasp, we had a computer with this primitive GUI for DOS called Norton Commander. There was an image viewer and we had a collection of funny pictures that we downloaded from BBS's. Pics of Alf, and of a bear peeing in a urinal. Goofy stuff that amused people before the internet. I'm sure much of this is Greek to many of you, so I'll cut to the chase. One day I found a folder labeled XXX. Not knowing exactly what that stood for, I opened it up and saw a list of images. The first one I opened was an animated GIF of a woman bent over a dishwasher and getting railed from behind. I yelled, "Dad, help. I don't know how to get this off of the screen." knowing full well that I just had to hit ESC. I've never seen him run so fast in my entire life. TLDR. Found dad's secret pee stash and made him exit out of it. I caught my mom putting in my dad's catheter once. One of those times you really wish your mom wasn't a nurse, and the fact that he was totally naked and... Wait a minute. My mom was a principal, not a nurse. Caught us engaging in post-marital coitus. He was 2. It wasn't a big deal. My husband was acting like an idiot while he changed after work. He doesn't wear boxers under his uniform, so that he was flailing his dong around like an idiot. Right as he started to helicopter it, noises included, my 5-year-old woke up and barged into out room. There he stood with his butt pressed to out wall, holding his boxers in front of him, telling her to get out. I was no help for about a minute as I was just giggling. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.